The morning sun stretched long, golden fingers across the hills as I steered my pickup toward the ranch, the gravel crunching under my tires. Like dry toast, Buck, my golden retriever, sat up in the passenger seat, ears perked, tail thumping lazily. It was supposed to be another quiet start to another long day. Just me, the cows, and a to-do list that never got shorter. But as I rounded the last bend onto Old Hickory Trail, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The entrance to my family's ranch was sealed off by a brand new chain-link gate, padlocked and topped with a red and white metal sign. Private road, HOA property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I braked hard, gravel spraying. Buck barked once, like he couldn't believe it either. Climbing out, I walked to the gate and gave it a hard tug. It clanged uselessly against the steel post. The padlock was thick, commercial grade, and brand new. Just beyond it, my driveway stretched half a mile toward the barn, looking strangely distant, like it no longer belonged to me. I didn't need to check the fine print to know who was behind it. Across the road, sitting smug on her wraparound porch, was Lenora Halberd. Bathrobe, slippers, oversized sunglasses, queen of her HOA kingdom. She sipped from a mimosa glass and waved. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she called out, her tone dripping with something just south of polite. "What the hell is this?" I asked, gesturing to the gate. She smiled. "Just a community safety measure." The board voted to close Old Hickory Trail to non-resident traffic. I took a breath, trying to leash the temper bubbling up inside me. My ranch has used this entrance since before your HOA had its first bake sale. And we respect that history, she said smoothly. But things change. Tractors, trailers, livestock. It's disruptive to our residents. The children play nearby. Children shouldn't be playing in a public access road, I snapped. And this gate's not just disruptive, it cuts off my only paved entrance. Well, you still have that charming gravel trail through Widow's Gully, don't you? Widow's Gully was a glorified ditch, rutted, steep, and prone to flash flooding. Just last spring, I'd lost an axle trying to get a hay delivery through. "There! You had no right to do this," I said, stepping closer. "This isn't HOA land. It's a public road." She stood, set her mimosa down, and walked to the porch railing like she was addressing a crowd. The board's legal team found language in the developer's covenants that grants us oversight of all roads within our perimeter. Old Hickory falls within the boundary lines. I stared at her. "Lenora, you can't just rewrite access to a man's land with a vote." "We can, and we did," she said, the edge finally showing in her voice. "The board agrees it's better. This way, for everyone's peace of mind." Her tone softened again, falsely sweet. "It's nothing personal, of course. It was always personal with Lenora. She moved in 5 years ago, right after the housing development sprung up on the northern edge of my ranch. She'd been gunning for control ever since. Complaints about dust from harvests, noise from the generator, the smell of manure on breezy mornings. She treated my livelihood like an inconvenience, a stubborn stain on her pristine suburban fantasy. "I'm going to have this gate taken down," I said, my voice flat. She laughed, soft and triumphant. "Try it. We've already filed notice with the county." I stared at her for a moment longer, the tightness in my chest slowly hardening into something sharper. "Enjoy your morning," I muttered, turning back to my truck. As I drove away, Buck leaned against my side, tail still. I glanced once in the mirror, at the fence, the sign, the woman watching me, like she'd finally won. But she hadn't, not yet. Because if Lenora Halberd and her HOA wanted to fight over dirt and concrete. They were about to learn something real, important. You don't fence out a rancher without knowing exactly what kind of land he owns, or what he's willing to do to keep it. The county clerk's office smelled like sun-warmed paper and old coffee. I waited at the front desk, hat in hand, watching the clock tick past 9:01 a.m. The line behind me was growing, but I wasn't moving. Not until I got what I came for. After a 10-minute shuffle of folders and small talk, Miss Patty finally waved me over with a thin smile. "Morning, Jace. Trouble? Nothing I can't shovel through," I said. "I need property records for Old Hickory Trail. Everything. Easements, deeds, transfers. Going back at least 30 years. Her smile twitched. "Sounds like someone's been rubbing elbows with the halberd woman. More like ramming fences." Patty shook her head, mumbling something about HOA lunatics as she walked to the back room. She returned 20 minutes later with a cardboard box stacked with manila envelopes and yellowing deeds. I took it to a table, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. It was all there, page after page of legalese, property lines, utility right-of-ways. At first glance, it looked bad. The original developer had labelled Old Hickory as a community access road in the fine print. The HOA had probably clung to that phrase like gospel, but 2 hours in, I found it, a plat map, dated 1987. Scribbled in pencil and nearly faded, it showed something different, something important. Parcel 17C, reserved. Future commercial utility corridor. Ownership retained by previous landholder. My jaw clenched. That landholder was my grandfather, back when this area was nothing but cattle and cedar. He'd sold part of our northern acreage to a development firm, but he'd kept the right to that road. And that right had passed down to me. "Patty," I called, voice sharp with adrenaline. "I need this copied and notarized." She hustled. "Over. You find what you needed. I found what they missed." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a black coffee, the plat map laid out like a battle plan. Buck snoozed nearby, nose twitching. Across the room, an old framed photo of my grandfather watched from the mantel. He had that same stubborn glint in his eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. "You built this place, so we wouldn't have to bow to anyone," I muttered. Time to make good on that. The next morning, I drove straight to the county assessor's office and filed a motion to review the land use status of Old Hickory Trail. Then I called a land surveyor and told him to bring stakes. I also hired an attorney, Stan Holloway, a semi-retired bull-headed local who despised HOA overreach more than I did. By Friday, we had the legal wheels turning, and that's when Lenora struck back. I returned from town to find a certified letter, nailed to my mailbox post. It was wrapped in plastic, like a dead fish. Cease and desist. She was claiming trespassing, defamation, and interference with community governance. Her signature was in bold cursive, complete with her self-assigned title, HOA President, Silver Pines Community. I laughed all the way to the barn. Then I called Stan. "We're not going to argue," he said. "We're going to outmaneuver." "How?" "We buy the road." I blinked. "You mean outright? Old Hickory's technically carved from the utility corridor that your grandfather reserved. Since the HOA never formalized ownership beyond implied use, the county could entertain a private acquisition, especially if we show it's being misused. And how do we prove that?" He chuckled. "They blocked a legal rancher's access. That's not safety. That's harassment." 3 weeks later, the deal was done. The county, fed up with the HOA's complaints, lawsuits, and fence drama, approved the transfer. I cut the check, filed the paperwork, and took title to the road. Old Hickory Trail now belonged to me. I didn't take down the gate. Not yet. Instead, I added a second one, bigger, stronger, bright red, and in bold white lettering, I posted a new sign. Private road, ranch access only. HOA trespassers will be towed. That evening, I sat on my porch with a lemonade and watched as Lenora's Lexus slowed to a crawl in front of my new gate. Her sunglasses were off this time, and her face had all the color of skim milk. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, but I did. Because the roadblock she thought would shut me down, it had just become my first weapon. The first tractor rolled onto Old Hickory at dawn. It was a rust-red Massey Ferguson, driven by my nephew Clay, sunburnt 16, and grinning like he'd just been handed the keys to the kingdom. Behind him came a John Deere baler, then 2 hay trailers, then a rickety flatbed, loaded with scrap fencing. They parked diagonally along the road, blocking it completely, and then we brought in more. By midday, Old Hickory Trail was a mosaic of machinery. Tractors, tillers, plows, and trailers, some functional, others little more than metal fossils. I'd spent the last week calling in favors from every farmer within 50 miles. They knew what Lenora had done. They knew who she'd tried to shut down, and they were more than happy to help. I walked the line slowly, arms folded, boots crunching, over the gravel I now legally owned. The once quiet street had transformed into an industrial ribbon of farm grit and horsepower. Exhaust curled in the air like incense. Hydraulic oil shimmered in rainbow puddles on the ground. By noon, the HOA's email chain was in full meltdown mode. Stan forwarded me the highlights. Unacceptable obstruction. Children can't ride bikes. It smells like a diesel. Convention. Why is there a combine harvester in front of my driveway? The best part, I hadn't violated a single ordinance. They'd wanted control of the road. Now they had it, right through the middle of my makeshift tractor depot. At 3:00 p.m., Lenora stormed up in yoga pants and fury, flanked by 2 HOA board members, Steve, a weasel with a clipboard, and Leanne, a retired librarian who always clutched her pearls like they were rosary beads. She didn't knock. She marched straight to my porch. "This is harassment," she said, teeth clenched so tight I could hear the enamel grinding. I sipped my iced tea. "This," I said calmly, "is agriculture. You've turned our street into a junkyard." "Our street." I tilted my head. "I was under the impression y'all were finished with this road." She stabbed a finger toward the row of machinery. "You think this is clever, Will? Have you cited for health code violations, noise, traffic obstruction?" Stan appeared beside me like a stage magician, wearing a Panama hat and a smug grin. "You'd be surprised what counts as lawful land use under the state's right to Farm Act," he said, "especially when the land in question is privately owned, zoned agricultural, and currently under inspection by the county for future utility development." Lenora blinked. "Future utility? We're installing a water line," I added. "For livestock. Permits pending, of course. In the meantime, these machines are part of the prep process. You know, surveying, digging, planning." She looked like she'd swallowed a spoonful of vinegar. "There are families here, Mr. Carter," she hissed. "Children, grandparents. You're creating a hostile environment." I stood. "You blocked my ranch entrance. You chained off the only paved road I had." "I didn't threaten your family, Lenora. You threatened my livelihood." Her face flushed, then paled. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I said, "but it makes me the landowner." She stepped back. Steve muttered something about emergency injunctions. Leanne looked like she might faint. I didn't care. By the end of the week, the HOA filed an official complaint. With the county zoning board, Stan responded with a 30-page dossier, including aerial photos, historical records, and signed affidavits from half a dozen nearby ranchers. The county dismissed their claim without a hearing. Lenora wasn't just losing the road, she was losing her grip. Meanwhile, I doubled down. I added solar-powered floodlights, bought an old shipping container, and parked it beside the road, slapped a hand-painted sign on it. Tractor parking, daily rate 0.00, unless you're HOA. And the farmers kept coming. By now, it wasn't just revenge, it was community. We held tailgate breakfasts every Saturday. Buck roamed from truck to truck like a sheriff. Retired ranch hands swapped stories by the hay trailer. Teenagers practiced with lasso ropes. Country music poured from Bluetooth speakers and spilled down the street. And Lenora, she couldn't even get her garbage truck through without calling me first. That gate she installed, it stayed, but now I held the keys. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, tucked neatly into an official-looking envelope, and hand-delivered by a courier in a crisp white shirt. No return address, no pleasantries, just bold type on thick paper. Silver Pines HOA hereby demands the immediate removal of all agricultural machinery from Old Hickory Trail. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation. Folded the letters slowly and dropped it on the kitchen table, next to my coffee mug. Buck gave it a sniff, sneezed, then walked away, unimpressed. I felt the same. They were bluffing again. But something about the letter's tone. It wasn't the usual HOA bark. It was desperate, formal, final. That's when I knew. They were bleeding. Stan confirmed it that afternoon. They've blown half their legal budget fighting you, he said, tapping his laptop. Board members are resigning. Residents are furious. And rumor has it, Lenora's facing internal votes for removal. I leaned back on the porch rail, watching a pair of harvesters lumber across my road like gentle dinosaurs. Then we're almost there. Oh, we're past there, Stan said with a grin. One more move, one more push, and the Queen falls. That evening, I hosted what would later be called the Tractor Roundup. We cleared out every piece of equipment on Old Hickory, only to replace it with twice as many, in rows so neat it could have passed for a museum. Cleaned, polished, and flagged. Each machine bore a laminated sign detailing its name, model, and the farm it came from. We set up a grill, hung string lights, even brought in a local bluegrass band. By sunset, the road was a festival. Families from both sides of the ranch boundary showed up, some curious, some cautious. A few HOA residents even smiled, their shoulders relaxing when they realized this wasn't a war zone, just folks celebrating the land and the work it took to live on it. And then Lenora arrived. She wore her usual pastels, but the crispness was gone. Her bun sagged, her jaw trembled, her Lexus crept through the crowd like it didn't belong there anymore. She stepped out and stared at the crowd in disbelief. "You turned it into a circus," she muttered. "No," I said, standing beside the display of my grandfather's original tractor, polished to a shine. "I turned it into a community." She laughed. A dry, broken sound. "You think this matters. You think you've won. They're turning against you too, you know. Your noise, your traffic, your dust. You've disrupted everything. I've disrupted your control." She didn't deny it. Behind her, 2 HOA board members, new ones, younger, stood silently, watching. One of them nodded at me. The other simply turned and walked back to his car. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. "I could have fought you in court, could have thrown lawyers at you for years. But I didn't want to ruin the neighborhood. I just wanted to be left alone to work my land. You bought a road to spite us. I bought a road, I said evenly, to survive your tyranny. She looked away, blinking fast, and then, for the first time since this whole mess began, she didn't speak. She just left. The next morning, the HOA newsletter came out. Lenora Halberd, removed from presidency by majority vote, replaced effective immediately. No fanfare, no farewell, just an ending. 2 weeks later, the new board met with me at the gate. Mr. Carter, the new president, a soft-spoken man named Eli, said, "We'd like to start over. Clean slate. Would you consider shared access with appropriate easements?" I looked at the tractors, the empty fields, the road now packed hard from a summer of boots and tires. "I'll consider it," I said. "But the gate stays." He nodded. "Fair enough." And just like that, peace returned to Silver Pines. The tractors rolled home. The hay trailers left. Buck reclaimed his porch throne. The road still bore the marks of our stand. Oil stains, flattened grass, tire ruts like battle scars. But no one forgot who held the deed. I didn't buy the road for power. I bought it because sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to own the ground they stand on. And when the HOA blocked my ranch entrance, they thought they'd stopped a man. What they didn't realize was that they'd woken one.